Chapter 1, and here we go. Don't forget who you are. Section 1, Fresh Bait. The first day of school for Campbell County in La Follette, Tennessee. A new batch of freshmen were coming in from one of the 3 middle schools in Campbell County for the seasoned students to prank and gaslight. Anne's older sister, Violet, was heading into her senior year. This was good news for Anne, as she would have some form of a safety net. Sister was not so nourishing. They had planned to carpool together, since Violet had her license and her own car. Anne stood before the mirror after she had put on makeup, preparing for her first day in a new school. Once she finished seeing the time on the clock that hung on the bathroom wall, that it was nearing 7:30 a.m. After completing her makeup, hair, and dressing in a basic pair of low-cut jeans, one of her sister's old band shirts, and tied her little red jacket around her waist, she stepped in front of her mother's full-view mirror to analyze the outcome. Grimacing, she sighed, knowing everyone would likely make fun of her today.
"Anne, I'm leaving. Hurry the hell up!"
Her sister screamed from the foyer, followed by the door slamming. She looked back in the mirror one last time, then rushed out. Grabbing her backpack and slinging it over her shoulder, she briskly walked, heading down the long hallway, turning right towards the stairs that led into the foyer, and ran out of the door to her sister, who was already in the car waiting. Anne jumped off the porch, sprinting to the gold car in the yard as Violet started the engine.
"Took you long enough,"
Violet mentioned, looking over at Anne and curling her lip at the poor job Anne had done with her makeup. Now is not the time to make fun of her, Violet considered with a hint of resentment, as much as she wanted to. It was Anne's first day in a new school after all.
We must play nice, but from here on out it's game on,
Violet thought.
"Sorry, I didn't see how late it was."
Anne apologized, placing her backpack on the floorboard. She turned to the window while feeling the nervous ache in her gut, developing what was to come and the unknown that she was to face, just as all the children do when going to a new school. Violet wore a dark blue shirt with a skater logo across the chest, along with a pair of faded flare jeans, a basic black studded belt, a multicolored skater shoes, and with the laces tucked inside the soles. Her blonde and black streaked hair was straightened in what Anne considered as perfect and flowed weightlessly from the breeze. Violet was a master in cosmetology, thus her hair and makeup took little effort for a beautiful outcome. Violet's eyeshadow blending it into a deep purple that defined her sky blue eyes. Anne, on the other hand, wore a medium gray shadow that was not as well defined as Violet's, but it suited her sea green eyes nonetheless. The early morning air was growing humid, causing Anne's hair to begin fluffing and curling back into the natural wave that she despised. The girls were already close to the school as the traffic around them had become heavy until it was at a standstill in small intervals. While they inched their way towards their destination, Violet discussed some of the items she felt Anne needed to know before they arrived.
"For one thing,"
Violet began, turning to Anne with a matter-of-fact expression.
"there's no pool on the second floor, so yeah. And 2, there's no second floor, so don't let any idiots try to tell you otherwise."
Why would there be a pool on the second floor anyway? Anne questioned.
"I don't fucking know, 'cause people are stupid,"
Violet jested. Anne chuckled absent-mindedly. She was more concerned about how close they had gotten to the school. They were approaching the gated entrance of the school grounds. Anne was growing more anxious by the minute, feeling her stomach twisting up in knots. Violet sensed this.
"It's not that bad,"
Violet promised. She paused a moment, but noticed the frown Anne wore had dropped lower as she peered out the window.
"Really? If I can do it, then you can. We're pretty much the same person, except I'm cooler than you."
Violet smiled. Violet, who was an AB student, had a crowd of other students she had made friends with during the previous 3 years she had attended the school. Anne considered Violet as a beautiful young woman, a woman she would never come close to achieving the same beauty as she. But she had become accustomed to ignoring this. though it was often floating around in the back of her mind. As far as Anne's grades, she was lucky to receive an A in any class. But there were far greater things Anne had to worry about at the present moment, as she peered at the large building of dark red brick and many windows that she would soon be attending. They turned right onto Cougar Lane, which only had the school on, and not so coincidentally, the cougar was the school's mascot. The vehicle coasted through the gate. On the right side was a large sign hung up on the fence with a picture of a cougar drawn and painted orange and blue, stating, "Welcome back." To the left was the guard shack that was also painted blue, but with no guard at this time. Straight ahead, the building stood high and intimidating. The library was the first area of the school that was visible, with its tall and tinted windows that were nearly 15 feet high, and the large letters in rusty copper reading, "Library." Once the girls reached Violet's assigned parking spot, Violet turned to Anne.
Listen, my parking spot is E24, okay?
Violet mentioned, then flicked the orange and blue tag hanging from her rearview mirror.
So don't get lost trying to find me when we're out of school, okay? Get out as fast as you can so we can get the hell out of here.
The girls walked up to the school entrance together. There were at least 50 other students outside, all doing their own things, whether it was standing around and chatting or walking to their destination. Anne's legs felt they were turning into jelly. She swung her backpack around to her front, unzipped it, and began fumbling around until she found her printout of her schedule. She carefully looked it over. Math, room 304, on the west wing. She whispered to herself, slumping in near defeat.
God, I'm never going to find my classes and be on time,
She thought.
Violet, where's the West Wing?
The girls walked under the rusty blue awning and approached at a set of double doors bearing slender windows with thin metal wiring and shatter-resistant glass that Anne found eerily similar to the entrance of a prison. Anne pushed the metal bar on the door, opening to what appeared to be a retro 60s fashioned lobby. The floor had a dusty appearance. When Anne saw the pattern was tiny shapes that reminded her of a hospital floor. This floor led up to the thickly painted white walls made out of cement blocks. Over to their left was a long hallway. On the wall to the right of this hallway was the front office, then another hallway after the office block. Across a section of the school was another set of double doors that led outside to the other parking lot. To the right was the cafeteria that was separated by 3 thick columns that matched the thickly painted walls, with a single payphone that hung from the thickest column in the middle. Within the cafeteria were 2 other halls on the opposite walls inside. Anne's hands and feet began prickling, thinking of how much bigger the school was than she initially realized. Violet chimed in, pointing down the first hall on the left.
Okay, so go down this hallway until you reach the end of the wall. Once you get there, it splits on both ends. Take the left and then take a right instead of going straight. Yeah, I know it's weird. And then keep going until you see the lockers. Once you're at the lockers, you should be in the 300s.
Violet explained, while gesturing with her hands. Violet then pulled out her own schedule, glanced around a brief moment, then spotted her route.
You'll do fine, Coo. I gotta go. I'll see you after school.
She gave a brief smile and a single wave of her hand, heading towards the cafeteria, then disappeared down the hallway on her right. Anne peered up, still standing in the same spot with her schedule in her hands. The papers trembled slightly. Okay, first, breathe. Next, take a left down this first hallway, she repeated to herself. Then, when I reach the end of this hall, take a left. The hallways felt enormous once she stood at the end of one, staring down to the other end. There were clusters of students standing in unorganized circles talking to one another, while there were others that would travel the hall in gaggles. Anne noticed stray students walking by themselves here and there, while there were others that were jogging and a handful that were sprinting down the hallways, with their backpacks flopping up and down their back as they went. Anne stood there realizing how alone she really was right now. Most of the students likely had already been there before, had a tour, had other siblings who had come here and told them about the layout of the school. Violet had not done this with Anne before arriving. This may have been where their confidence came from. She then had the thought pop into her head that perhaps most of the students knew, just from looking at her, that she was a freshman. Fresh bait. Anne sighed and made her way slowly down the hall, weaving around other bodies, and finally reached the end of the hall. She peered around, turned left, then right, and saw what Violet had mentioned when explaining the odd layout of the area. She was nearly to her class. She looked to the nearest room, reading the small burgundy plate boring the numbers 280.
I'm close.
Anne kept on until she arrived at the area where the lockers were. On one of the upcoming doors, the burgundy plaques reached 300. Anne kept her eyes on the plaques as she walked. 300, 301, 302, 303. Anne was in the path of a sprinter. Her shoulder collided with their sharp elbow, knocking her off her feet. She fell into a group of preppy girls who turned and gazed at Anne with anger and disgust. The brown-haired girl she had fallen into shoved Anne off of her and spat.
Watch it, bitch!
Anne said nothing, turned away, feeling her cheeks as well as her ears growing hot and red. Her insides swelled with anger and humiliation. She peered back up in search of the plaques, trying not to make eye contact with anyone, and read 310 on the next door. Oh, no, 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 she whispered frantically as she shook her head in disbelief. Anne turned around several times, examining the hallway and the door numbers. Like any new place, especially those that are large, it's easy to get lost. Okay, I just gotta find 303 again. Another student bumped into her, but she was able to keep her balance and not topple into anyone. The culprit never turned to apologize and kept running until they were out of sight. She then realized she was standing in the hallway with all these people, in this unfamiliar place with all these unfamiliar faces, foreign smells and sounds. Sudden awareness hit her. The clothes on her skin, the backpack on her shoulders weighing them down, the heat from all the bodies around her, the expansion of her lungs swelling and retracting, the knot in her throat. Her panic rose. You're not gonna make it here? Grimacing, she looked back up, and there it was, 304. Thank God. Anne ran to the door, zigzagging around all the bodies bustling around in the hall, but careful not to hit anyone, reaching the door, then slinked inside. So far, it appeared she was the first one to arrive. The room had 5 rows of desks containing 6 desks each, organized in lines facing the whiteboard on the wall to her right. The walls were the same gloppy white as they were in the halls. The desktops showed years of wear, turning them once pine brown into a musty yellow. Many of the desks were graffitied on, displaying pen, marker, and some of it was carved into the desk itself. One of the desks had a large wad of green gum plastered on the steel cubby underneath, with quite a large ball of hair dangling from it. Her stomach recoiled and looked away. A short, slender teacher glanced up when Anne entered the room and briefly smiled before returning back to the papers. Anne peered around the room in search of the best desk to be at least noticeable in, and placed in a way that she could make it easy for her to escape quickly when the bell rings. A desk in the far right-hand corner of the room, and chose this one. She took her seat and pulled out her math book along with her favorite type of mechanical pencil and a fresh spiral notebook, and then tried to patiently wait for class to begin.